Thanks, Ruth, for joining the show. I appreciate your presence. Well, let's get started.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we dive into the world of C++, would you mind giving us some insight in your background and your journey in the world of software engineering?
Yeah, sure. I've started my programming journey back in 1997, and
Mm,
today I'm the co-founder of Secure Globe Inc. From New York City, and we specialize in cybersecurity, cyber intelligence, and large-scale projects, development projects. I am a great believer in C++, and
mm.
I use it whenever there's a need to develop anything for any purpose.
Yeah,
I even use C++ for use cases that other would probably use other languages. For
yeah.
example, AI, automation, web, even cryptography. I know
Mm,
it's harder, but it's worth it for the long run. And if you check our product page on our website, you can see the variety of our technologies, our products, and everything is developed in pure C++. Also, I recently finished my C++ book for complete beginners, which
mhm.
was written with my husband, Michael Haephrati, who is also a very gifted C++ developer, much more than myself.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and we are very proud of this book. We worked really hard for it to be a great book. It's about to be published early next year by
Okay,
Manning Publications. But actually, readers can get early access if they want to.
that's awesome. The link is going to be in the description below. If you are interested to look into it more. So C++ is a versatile language with diverse application. Can you tell us some real-world applications or industries where C++ is commonly used right now?
Um, yes, there are a lot of use cases and industries that C++ is used. Actually, everywhere you look, C++ fingerprints all over the place.
Mhm.
Starting with operating systems, Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Android, um, even, of course, embedded systems, car computers, autonomous driving, medical devices, appliances. Of course, I think one of the most nice and appealing use case for C++ is computer games and video games. Companies like Fortnite, games like Fortnite, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto. Uh, they're all games that were developed in C++, and actually almost all the computer games engines are C++ based, such as Unreal, Unity, even
Mhm.
Panda 3D. So it's actually hard to find a game or video that wasn't developed in C++.
Okay.
And of course, we have high performance computing applications, scientific simulations, even the Human Genome Project and CERN, the physics research at CERN in Switzerland. And of course, I think the nicest bit is the March rover, the Mars rover. Uh,
Mhm.
of course, C++ will take humanity to Mars. It won't be Python or Go or C#, it will be C++. And I think it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Um, so when learning various programming languages, it's crucial to know their differences. What are the fundamental difference between C++ and other programming languages like Python, Java, or C Sharp?
Well, there are many differences between them. And I think it's an important question, especially if you're new and you want to choose which programming languages
Exactly.
to learn. I think C++ distinguishes itself from Python, in terms of typing, memory management, performance, syntax, and of course, the target applications. Um, I can say that C++ and programming languages like Python and C# and Java they're all general purpose programming languages, but they have some key differences. All the languages support object-oriented programming, but they actually implement it differently. C++ offers a manual memory management, for example, with classes. Python,
Okay.
Java, and C# are more, they integrate object-oriented features within the core of the language. I would also say that C++ is generally considered faster. It's more performance efficient than Python and Java and C# and other languages. And this is because C++ compiles to machine code while the other use virtual machine or they are interpreted languages. Another difference is that C++ supports multiple programming paradigms like procedural programming, as well as object-oriented, and also
Okay.
generic programming.
Oh,
When I say generic programming, I mean that the type is integrated within the language itself. It's type safe.
okay.
While Python, Java, C# they support multiple programming paradigms, but they are typically more focused on object-oriented above everything. That's the general idea. Of course, the use cases are very different from C++ to other languages.
Yeah, and for someone completely new to programming, taking the first step could be very daunting experience. How can a complete beginner with no programming experience can start their journey in C++? Let's say
Um,
it's the first one language they pick.
yeah, I actually love this question because I think some C++ experts will tell you it's hard to start with C++, especially if you're a complete beginner.
Mhm.
I personally believe that it's quite the opposite. And we actually wrote our C++ book for complete beginners to programming, which was very challenging, but we made no assumptions about what the reader may or may not know. Now, to answer your question, I think there are 4 tips I would provide from my experience. First is just start slowly. The basic concepts of C++ are not hard. And I mean, variables, operators, flow control, containers, pointers, functions, object-oriented, they're pretty easy, but really take it slow, baby steps. Don't rush yourself. Really let these concepts really sink in. And my second tip would be to practice. Just practice a lot. There are many platforms, Codility, for example, but many other platforms that you can really take a course. You can buy a book, maybe our book. Just practice. And I think one key tip I can give to new programmers or new to C++ or to any programming language is to invest in learning some key computer science concepts, which
Okay.
nothing to do with the language itself, but it will help you as a root foundation to learning the programming language. So I'm talking about memory management, or how function calls happen, how they work, about the stack and the heap, and more and more. And the more you invest in computer science, in the fundamentals, it will be easier for you to understand the why and not only how. And of course, I mean, my final advice to beginners, that's of course, it's a good advice to anyone who starts to learn a new programming language, is don't be afraid to make mistakes. And mistakes are basically, they're your best teachers and they're your best friends. And just enjoy the ride. That's the most important thing.
Those are great advice. And what are some basic tools and software needed to set up your development environment for C++? What would be your recommendation?
Yeah, well, there are plenty of free tools. I mean, you don't have to to spend money or resources. You have online compilers, but I personally recommend downloading a free version of Visual Studio, which is actually the most powerful IDE. And you can work with Visual Studio. You can do Python, and you can do C#, and you can do so many other programming languages. And it's the preferred IDE for most companies. And if you're looking for a job as a C++ programmer, then start practicing the most common and powerful IDE. But VS Code is also a good choice. So basically it's free, it's easy to set up your IDE, and there are plenty of online guides where you can just learn how to do it.
Yeah, I want to circle back to the previous question. You mentioned that basic software development concept. Someone has to understand like stack, heaps, memory management. Are there any books and resources that you can recommend someone to have a deeper understanding of those concepts?
Not that I can just out of my mind right now, but I can tell you that in our book we do put a lot of emphasis on basic computer science concepts, like memory management. We try to dive deeper as much as we can, and I think most books, most courses, most online resources do that as well. But I know today you can find anything that you want online, and free. So that's not a problem.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And mistakes are part of the learning process. And I'm sure even someone is going over the book, they will run into some errors and they cannot solve the problem. How can a beginner effectively troubleshoot common syntax error in their C++ code?
Yeah, that's also an important question, and I would say there are several ways. But I have to say that syntax error, for example, are the most common childhood disease.
Yeah.
Every programmer suffers from, and at some point, you get immune. And I remember I always forgot to place a semicolon at the end of the statement, or I had mismatched parentheses. Everybody has this problem when they begin, and it took me a while to get used to it because it's a new language. I always say, it's like practicing the piano or any musical instrument. You have to learn to read notes, and it takes time. But the good news is that most IDEs, compilers, or IDEs have autosense, and you can see the indication of an error, of a syntax error. Usually the red line, like in MS Word when you have a spelling error. And the compiler will also alert. Usually you will have an output, a message telling you what the error is and where it is located. And I know the compiler error message, they can be confusing at first, but they usually contain all the information that you need to fix the error. And you can always look for the information online. And of course, there are many resources available online that, that can help you troubleshoot C++ syntax error. And you can find tutorials, articles, forums, whatever you need. But I think the most important thing is that don't be afraid to make mistakes and ask for help. And that's just a really natural process in your learning journey.
Yeah, that makes sense, Ruth. And what is your take on someone using AI, like AI tool like ChatGPT, as a part of their learning process?
Well, ChatGPT actually, I have to say, it makes a lot of mistakes, code-wise. So I wouldn't trust it so much, and I think it's a bit counterproductive to use it. If you want to learn to program, get your hands dirty, dive deep, and do the work yourself. Don't let others do your homework. It's not the easiest path. Of course, it's easier to use AI, but I wouldn't recommend it at first. But I think you can use AI to empower yourself with knowledge. Of course, bearing in mind that there are a lot of mistakes, a lot of error that ChatGPT and even Bard that they make. So I would be very cautious.
Yeah, that's a great wisdom.
Yeah.
And how can a beginner practice and reinforce their C++ knowledge through coding exercises and projects?
Well, I would say that the path towards mastering C++ is really starting small. Said before, baby steps. Search for small exercises. I mean, don't try to tackle complex projects right away. You might be eaten alive, and it will be. I think it will make you feel like a failure, and maybe cause you to be more cautious and more afraid to continue in learning the language. So just start with small, simple exercises that focus on specific aspects of C++, such as variables, data types, loops, functions, and other topics and concepts. And I think you also need to find a good resource for coding exercises. There are many resources available, as I said, online and libraries that provide coding exercises for beginners. So, look for a resource that has a variety of exercises at different difficulty levels. I would also recommend to exercise regularly. I mean, again, I said, it's just like playing the piano. The best pianist practice every day. So just give yourself a time every day to practice. It doesn't have to be a long time, but, be consistent. The more you practice, the better you will become. And again, it's true for anything. And once you have mastered the basics, I think start working on projects. That will be the next step. And projects are a great way to practice C++. And again, start with small projects. Gradually increase complexity as you learn. And actually, in our book, we have a lot of projects. For example, a project that teaches the reader to read and write to a file. So we are combining different aspects of C++. We have the file, we have variables, we have reading, writing, and stream, input stream, output stream. So again, and I think that's the most important thing. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's only natural, especially with C++, because it's not the easiest language to learn.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And learning involves overcoming challenges and avoiding common pitfalls. Do you have what are some common pitfalls and mistakes beginners should be aware of when learning C++?
Well, that's an important question, and I think there are quite a few pitfalls, but maybe I should focus in two.
Okay.
I think the worst pitfall is not understanding the basics, and we just talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
And C++ is a complex language, so if you don't have a good understanding of the basics of the foundation before you move on and learn more advanced concepts, you won't be able to master it. And just to make sure you understand the basics, like again, variables, data types, loops, functions, classes, object-oriented, of course, classes, pointers, really the fundamental stuff. It's just like math. If you don't know how to use simple arithmetic operations, you won't be able to move on to trigonometry. So you really have to have a good foundation, a strong foundation. Now, I think another common pitfall relates to memory management.
Okay.
Because C++ is a language that gives programmers a lot of control over memory management. So it also means that in some cases you have to be responsible for managing the memory yourself, to manage it properly.
Yeah.
And if it's not managed properly, it can lead to crashes, to memory leaks, and other terrible issues.
Yeah.
Though I have to say that modern C++ does strive to distance the users, the programmers, from touching memory.
Okay.
And that's we have smart pointers, but sometimes there is no choice, especially on low-level programming. You have to handle memory yourself. And I always say the graveyards are full of programmers who forgot to deallocate memory. So yeah, that I think that's one of the most common pitfalls for new programmers, especially if you move to C++ from other programming languages that memory is managed for you.
Exactly.
So a lot of Python developers, C# developers who move to C++ find it really difficult to get used to the idea of managing memory, because it's really different from the concept that is embedded in their minds as programmers. So I think that's a really common pitfall.
So you mentioned deallocating the memory. That's definitely a one of the pitfalls. What are some of other best practices would you share, or can you share about memory management for beginners? I'm sure there are millions of them.
Well, again, C++ does strive to move, to shift or to further away the programmers from touching the memory. So if you don't have to touch the memory yourself, if you don't have to manage it manually, just don't. Use smart pointers, use everything that C++ offers you to get further away from memory. But if you do need to touch memory, just be very cautious. Check yourself, test your code, and if of course if you're new, just ask for help, ask for guidance for somebody who really knows what he's doing. But again, even experienced programmers have issues with memory. So it's not just a common pitfall for beginners. It's an issue with C++. It's a bit like brain surgery. You can always fail.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So beside the book, which we will check out, can you recommend any other online coding platforms that someone can look to kind of learn C++?
Well, there are so many resources out there. I think one of the best resource is the C++ community.
Okay.
You have so many guides, blogs, forums, questions answered, and I think that's a really good resource. And you have so many YouTube's videos to new programmers about C++, but you also have to be cautious because a lot of books for new programmers, new C++ programmers, a lot of courses, they take it for granted, or they assume that you know things that you actually don't, or they don't explain things properly. And I think that's one of the reasons that many C++ beginners to C++, either fail or find it hard to learn, because it is a hard programming language to learn.
Yeah.
And I know I'm prejudiced, but in our book, we really didn't make any assumptions, and we really explain everything. Even for some readers, it may be, oh, why are they explaining it? I know it already. It's so easy, but it's not so easy to others. So I think you have to take under account that it's not so easy to learn, and not every beginner's guide is really suitable for beginners.
True. That makes sense. Well, thanks for being in the show, Ruth. And I appreciate you sharing all the invaluable advice.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.